Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and yep, Jerry Nadler was not happy about the whole Barr not showing up thing, but then you probably already have heard about that. Well, they've been exchanging these letters back and forth, and so I decided let's look into some of these letters that have been going back and forth to see what's going on. And the first one I came up with was this one right here, which was sent on May 1st. Now, this is from the Office of the Assistant Attorney General. This is not the Deputy Attorney General. In other words, it's not Rosenstein. This is from, what's his name? Stephen Boyd, I think. Yeah, Stephen Boyd, the Assistant Attorney General. Okay, and so let me go through some of this. Basically, he is responding to the idea that Jerry Nadler sent a subpoena to the Attorney General to come and talk at the hearing. Now, for those who may not have seen some of my other videos, in one of them, I mentioned that one of the reasons that they don't want a subpoena is because if you come willingly, then you are of your own volition. You're really not being treated like a criminal, kind of. If you are subpoenaed, you have to come by yourself totally. You cannot have anyone to help you. You cannot have any legal counsel with you or anything. Not that Barr really needs it, because Barr knows his stuff. So there's probably not a lawyer he could bring with him that would know more than he does. I don't think, because from the things I've heard him say, wow, this guy knows his stuff. He knows all the cases. He knows the law. And so I don't think he would need that, but it does place him under a little different legal umbrella, if you want to say it that way. So it's different when you go voluntarily and when you are subpoenaed. So there is a difference legally for him. It is much better to go voluntarily, so you don't have to deal with that whole subpoena thing. So anyway, I wanted to read this letter to you, and or at least parts of it, because he lays down the reasons why Barr didn't show up, okay? And not all of them, because the problem was Nadler was really laying down some rules that he could not abide by. Barr said, no, I'm not going to do that. I will come, I will testify, but not under those terms. And so having it as a subpoena was another real problem for the Attorney General Barr. He did not want to come under those terms. And he has reasons, and so he tasked this guy who has written several letters in the past, actually. He did a lot of letters for, Jeff Sessions and everything, going back and forth to Congress. So I think that's one of his roles in the Department of Justice. But anyway, so he did this letter and sent it off to Jerry Nadler, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary. So, that's what we're dealing with right here. On April 18, 2019, the Attorney General took the extraordinary step of publicly disclosing the report of Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III with as few redactions as possible. Under the regulations that govern the Special Counsel, his report was a confidential internal Department of Justice Department document, which contained the kind of prosecutorial deliberations that the department almost never releases publicly. And here's all the little regulations. I'm not going to read all those. Okay? Nevertheless, in response to those requests from you and other members, and in the interest of transparency, the Attorney General disclosed the report and volunteered to appear to testify before the committee. I mean, he volunteered, okay? So he didn't have to be subpoenaed. You only subpoena people who are not going to appear. So he didn't have to be subpoenaed. He volunteered to appear. In addition, the Attorney General offered you and other congressional leaders the chance to review the report with redactions only for grand jury information, because disclosure of that information is prohibited by law. Now, how many times do they have to keep saying that? Because they just aren't getting it through their heads. They think, well, surely that doesn't mean us. We don't have to abide by the law. Or something like that. I don't know, because it keeps being repeated and it doesn't sink into Jerry Nadler's head. Anyway, that would permit you to review, look at these percentages, 98.5% of the report, including 99.9% of Volume 2, which discusses the investigation of the president's actions. So see, they had almost everything. I mean, that's very little information that they didn't have. So what do they think? All the dirt is in those redactions, those few little redactions there? Yeah, I don't know. They just want something to whine about. And if you remember in this video, we talked about how they already had a plan to have all of these, quote, events when Barr would not release the entire Mueller report. And we knew he wasn't from the start because he can't, because it's grand jury information and it's not allowed by law for him to do that. So we knew he wasn't going to, but they have already planned these events where they would go around and protest because of it, saying that it was a cover-up. So that was planned long ago, before the Mueller report was even released, I believe. So anyway, you want to watch that video. If I remember correctly, I recorded that one before the Mueller report was even released. So, or it had just been released or something. It was right around that time. But yeah, they already had it planned, everything, 500 events. So, regrettably, before even reviewing the less redacted version or awaiting the Attorney General's testimony, you served a subpoena demanding 1, the unredacted report, 2, every document cited therein, and 3, all documents obtained and investigative materials created by the special counsel's office over nearly 2 years. In other words, the committee has demanded all of the special counsel's investigative files, which consist of millions of pages of classified and unclassified documents, bearing upon more than 24 criminal cases and investigations, many of which are ongoing. That's a neat little phrase there I want you to pay attention to. Many of which are ongoing. Well, then that doesn't mean, those Russians that they indicted, which one of them was not even it was a Russian company, and it was not even in existence at the time of the election. So, yeah, go figure on that one, huh? And the reason for that was because they didn't think that any of the Russians would try to come forward about it or to be there for the cases. Well, that Russian company stood up to them and they said, hey, we want to get into discovery here because you indicted us. So, hey, we want to know what we can do to put this legal ball in motion because we know we're not guilty because we didn't exist then. So, yeah, they called their bluff. And we never heard much more about that. Wonder what happened. So we got to wonder on this what the ongoing investigations are. Because it says more than 24 criminal cases and investigations. So, yeah, gotta wonder. They have nothing to do with collusion. We know that, right? So, can't be about that. Don't know what they are, but going to be interesting to find out, right? You served such a subpoena knowing that the department could not lawfully provide the unredacted report, that the committee lacks any legitimate legislative purpose for seeking the complete investigative files, and that processing your request would impose a significant burden on the department. And when he says the department, remember that's the Department of Justice. But one of the major things is here, it lacks any legitimate legislative purpose. You see, Congress can ask for things from other branches of the government, but they have to have a legitimate legislative purpose to do so. And they don't. That's the thing. And that's why, again, the Department of Justice is saying, no, we're not going to give you this stuff because you don't have a legitimate legislative purpose for seeking it. So no, you're not going to get it. That's what I really appreciate about Barr, because he has this kind of no attitude. I can't remember which one he said no to in the Senate hearing, but that was just too funny. They wanted the memos that he had written, and they said, well, then can we have those? And he goes, no. Oh, he had some really great lines. He's a great straight man. He really is. So anyway, it goes on. The department has always been willing to follow the constitutionally mandated accommodation process to address legitimate congressional requests for information. In this case, both the Attorney General's decision to release the report with minimal redactions and his willingness to testify were already extraordinary accommodations reflecting his respect for meeting the legitimate information needs of the committee and its members. But this subpoena is not legitimate oversight. The requests in the subpoena are overbroad and extraordinarily burdensome. More importantly, these requests would pose a fundamental threat to the confidentiality of law enforcement files and the department's commitment to keep law enforcement investigations free of political interference. Yeah, and I can't help but wonder if one of the reasons they want to see this stuff is to see if some of them are under investigation. They want to know, hey, am I one of the people that's counted in those ongoing investigations, criminal investigations? Because I think we have a lot of guilty consciences going on. You have to remember that. The people that are yelling the loudest are the most guilty. That's the way it works. And the most desperate to cover things up for themselves. So they're trying desperately to stop this great big snowball that is running down the mountainside. But I've got news for them. It's going to be like in those cartoons where the snowball comes down and Wile E. Coyote stands there and it plows right over him. And all you see is a snowball with his arms and legs sticking out. That's about what we're ready to see with all of these Democrats. They're not going to be able to stop it. It will run over them, and it is going to happen soon. And they know it. I mean, they can see that they're running out of defenses. They have nothing left, and they are grasping at straws to try to find something desperately to get at it so they can protect themselves. I mean, you need to understand, these people are really fighting for their lives. Literally, their lives. Because remember, all of this will come out as treason. And when you're talking treason, you know what the penalty for that is. For reasons integral to our law enforcement responsibilities, the department's practice is to reveal information about our criminal investigations only when we decide to prosecute, and then generally only in court, in our indictments and subsequent filings. When we decline to prosecute, we abide by fundamental principles of privacy and due process and refrain from publicly assessing the information that was assembled regarding individuals who were investigated but not prosecuted. You see, that's the way it works. If there was no real case against the person, then you don't put that out there. Because then it's kind of like slandering them, you know? There's no reason for it. But that's how the Democrats work. So for them, that's what they desperately need. They're really trying to find something that they can cling to continue this whole narrative that Orange Man bad. Okay? That's really where it comes down to. They're trying to persuade the American people that Trump is bad, that he is undermining our country and our Constitution. And it's so ludicrous, it's hard for us to believe, but that really is their mentality. And sadly, a lot of people have believed them over the years. And so when you try to talk to them, you really can't, because they don't accept what you're saying as truth. They can't see the reality of the lie they've been fed. And even now, I saw just today somebody on the mainstream media that was saying, you know, they were continuing on with this whole Russian collusion narrative. And it's like, hello, don't you know that you've been wrong for 2 years? You've been saying that, and it's now been proven false. So anyway, he goes on here. Attorney General Barr's decision to release the confidential report reflected an extraordinary accommodation of the congressional and public interests in the results of the special counsel's investigation and was justified because it was critical for the American people to know the special counsel's conclusion that the Trump campaign did not conspire or coordinate with Russia in its attempts to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. Yeah, it was really important. But as I said in my previous video, you know, it wouldn't have mattered what he did. when it comes down to it, he could not release it right away. And that was the only thing that they would have accepted. But even that they wouldn't have accepted. The Democrats don't care about the Mueller report. All they cared about was getting Trump. And since the Mueller report didn't do that for them, now they are just trying to find something they can use. And so that's the whole point behind it. It would not have mattered what Barr did. That's why, they're complaining about the summary he made. Well, duh, it's a summary. Summaries summarize things, And, as I did in the Spicer video, yeah, it was like having a verdict. When you come out of a courtroom, they give a verdict. They say, well, the person's either guilty or not guilty. Well, that's what Barr did. And later on, the court transcripts come out and you can read the whole proceeding. But that's not enough for them. And they even got to read the whole proceeding, or pretty much all of it. I mean, you saw the percentages. They got to see almost everything. But yet, that's still not enough. It's never enough. It's never going to be enough, because that's not their motive. Their motive is not to find the truth. Their motive is to find dirt on Trump. Okay, we are disappointed, however, that the committee has responded to this extraordinary accommodation by reflexively issuing a subpoena that threatens to swallow the extremely important principle that the department must preserve the confidentiality of its investigations. It is one thing for the Attorney General to disclose a written report of prosecutorial decisions, which was the verdict, but quite another thing to open up the entirety of the investigative file to congressional review. Allowing your committee to use Justice Department investigative files to reinvestigate the same matters that the department has investigated and to second-guess decisions that have been made by the department would not only set a dangerous precedent, but would also have immediate negative consequences. I think that is vital right there. That's exactly what they want to do, reinvestigate things. They didn't like how the special counsel came out, the verdict of it, so they want to reinvestigate. And it's like, why? That's what you hired the special counsel to do. And you didn't like the result, so now you want to do everything all over again for another year and a half until the 2020 election. That's what they're trying to do. Over the past year, you have repeatedly expressed concern that the special counsel's investigation would not remain free of outside interference. You now know, as reported in the Attorney General's March 22, 2019 letter, that the special counsel completed his investigation on his own terms and on his own schedule, and there were no instances where the Attorney General or his predecessors overruled the special counsel's judgment. That does not, however, mean that we now may tolerate the specter of congressional interference with the autonomy of the department's law enforcement functions. And then he starts getting into some legalese. But I think what's really kind of funny here, notice, assertion of executive privilege over documents generated in response to congressional investigation into Operation Fast and Furious. And guess who did that? Yep, that was Attorney General Holder, Eric Holder. Yep. So he cited Eric Holder. I think it's too funny that he did. I mean, yeah, okay, we're talking to Democrats here, so let's use a Democrat and point it out to him. Say, see, Holder did it, so, no. I mean, it's just funny that they used Holder. And then it goes on, and they're talking about some other ones, and they use this, other people. This is another attorney general. This one, I think, was under Bush. Yeah, I think so. And here's another one of it. And then down here was this guy, and he was under Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. And so, he gives those as examples and says, we just cannot do this. This is not the way our department has worked. It just really hasn't. And he continues on. A lot of it's legal speak. As always, I put all the links down below. So if you want to go through and read these paragraphs, you can. They just are a little bit of legalese here. And so then it goes on. Against this backdrop of the department's compelling need to protect the autonomy and effectiveness of its investigations, as well as the extraordinary steps the Attorney General has already taken to accommodate the committee's needs, the committee has not articulated any legitimate legislative purpose, remember it's got to have that legislative purpose, for its request for all of the special counsel's investigative files. The committee has no legitimate role in demanding law enforcement materials with the aim of simply duplicating a criminal inquiry, which is, of course, a function that the Constitution entrusts exclusively to the executive branch. In other words, hey guys, you're not the executive branch. You are the legislative branch. You have to do legislation. You do not do investigations and criminal inquiries. If the department were to provide law enforcement materials every time a high-profile and politically charged investigation was underway, we would irredeemably undermine the integrity and independence of law enforcement investigations. This is especially true here, where the committee has demanded every single document bearing upon over 24 separate criminal cases and investigations, and where the only point of the demand seems to be to generate public disclosures that the special counsel's extensive report did not already produce, and to second-guess prosecution and declination decisions made by the department. This is not a legitimate use of congressional investigative authority. See, Congress does have a legitimate oversight authority, but this is not the use of it, okay? This is way overstepping boundaries. For these reasons, the department is unable to provide the committee with the special counsel's investigative files. In reaching this conclusion, we do not close the door on engaging with the committee about potential further accommodations in response to properly focused and narrowed inquiry that is supported by a legitimate legislative purpose. If and when the committee has completed its review of the special counsel's report and has identified particularized and legitimate needs for information that are not satisfied by the report itself, we will be prepared to engage further with the committee and to respond to your specific requests for information. Our response, of course, must remain consistent with long-standing department obligations, including the need to protect the autonomy of criminal investigations, the obligation to protect grand jury information, and the legitimate confidentiality interests of the executive branch. In other words, we're going to abide by the law. We are the Department of Justice. That's what we do. We are also unable to honor your specific requests for the completely unredacted special counsel's report because disclosing grand jury information in response to congressional oversight requests is prohibited by law. And then it goes on about the Rule 6E and all of that stuff down here. And remember, it says, as noted above, this minimally redacted version would permit review of 98.5% of the report, including 99.9% of Volume 2, which discusses the investigation of the president's actions. And so it's signed again by Stephen E. Byrd, Assistant Attorney General. Okay, so you know Nadler, and this was dated May 1st. Okay, this was sent to Jerry Nadler on May 1st. Well, May 3rd, because the time came and went and Barr didn't show up and everything. So, yeah, Jerry's got to write a letter back. I write to respond to the department's letter of May 1st, 2019, refusing to comply with the Judiciary Committee's subpoena for the unredacted Mueller report, the document it cites, and other underlying materials. As you know, the committee has repeatedly engaged with your staff in writing, by telephone, and in person to discuss a way forward on the subpoena. Well, Jerry, you shouldn't have given a subpoena in the first place. That's what they're trying to say. You didn't need a subpoena. He was coming voluntarily. At the outset, we note that the department has never explained why it is willing to allow only a small number of members to view a less redacted version of the report, subject to the condition that they cannot discuss what they have seen with anyone else. Maybe it's because you guys leak it. You leak everything that you're given. Oh, that just is too funny. So, yeah, anyway, and then it goes on, and they're going to seek a court order permitting disclosure of the materials in the report that are subject to the grand jury information. It's like, really? Seriously? It's against the law. Why do you want to circumvent the law? We should be asking ourselves that. And the department has offered no reason whatsoever for failing to produce the evidence underlying the report, except for a complaint that there is too much of it and a vague assertion about sensitivity of law enforcement files. Okay, did he read the same letter we just did? I mean, didn't this letter here, wasn't this pretty explanatory as to why they weren't going to be giving them a big, huge bunch of files? I thought it was pretty plain, and I thought he used good legal foundational arguments, and he quoted from 3 previous attorneys general, 2 of them which were attorneys general under Democrats. So, I just don't get this. He is like in another world. And anyway, he goes on, complains. I'm not going to read all the rest of this because, you see, here they want to get the grand jury information and, well, it could be done. Yeah, well, unicorns may exist too, Jerry, but you're not going to see one. So, it goes on, and they're trying to, the committee is willing to prioritize a specific defined set of underlying investigative and evidentiary materials for immediate production. Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. Yeah. And they've already indicated in the instructions to the subpoena, we are also prepared to discuss limiting and prioritizing our request in item 3 of the subpoena for other underlying evidence obtained by the special counsel's office. So, they're saying, well, maybe we won't have to have all of it. But then he goes back and he's starting to, compare it again to the 880,000 pages that they were given, pertaining to investigation of Hillary Clinton. Well, now we're finding out why that was so important and why so much information had to be given to the investigators at the time, and those were the Republicans when they were in charge, because it was illegitimate, the whole thing. It was a bogus investigation. Hillary Clinton was never investigated. They put a show on, they brought her in, they asked her a few softball questions, they didn't even write a 302 about it, and then they let her go. Yeah, it was just for show, just to say that they did it, but they'd already had the exoneration letter. So anyway, Jerry is demanding a request by 9 a.m. on Monday, May 6th. Well, guess that is he wants them to work over the weekend. Well, gee, thanks, Jerry. We'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to go on there, but we'll see. And then, of course, Doug Collins, who is the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee. Well, pray for that guy, man. He's got to work next to Jerry Nadler all the time. I don't know how he can do it. I would not be able to stand it. But anyway, this is his statement. As Chairman Nadler continues to turn down free information from the Justice Department, he once again places absurd demands on the department to comply with his oversight request. His accusations do not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of this situation. Democrats continue to cite no precedent for the Justice Department ceding Congress grand jury materials outside of impeachment proceedings. And today's letter is inaccurate in claiming the Justice Department provided information to Congress as part of the Starr investigation. Democrats continue to deliver inaccurate statements and abusive politics while demanding the Attorney General either break the law or face contempt charges. Their chief complaint against the Attorney General is his upholding the rule of law when they wish him to disregard it. Oh, and Doug Collins hits the nail on the head again. So good job there, Doug. And, yeah, that's the House Judiciary Committee right now. Glad I'm not on it. So I'll try to keep you updated on those. I'm not sure what all is going to happen. There's been so much coming out today. I don't know if you heard about it. If you haven't seen the Papadopoulos interview on Hannity and some of the other stuff that's been coming out lately, Wow, so much of this. John Solomon had a couple of articles on the Hill talking about Ukrainian influence that was trying to support Hillary's campaign. And so there's lots of stuff going on and lots of things coming out. I don't know exactly when the declass is going to happen. I tend to think that the IG report is going to come out first about the whole FISA abuse. That is probably going to be the next big bombshell that comes out. And it's going to be pretty big. But the real big one, the topper, is going to be when Trump declassifies all this stuff. And he will do it. I mean, he said again on Fox the other day, yep, he is going to do it. It's going to happen. And he's supposed to be meeting with Theresa May and the Queen of England in June, I believe. I think that's going to be very interesting. Because remember, we know now that there were British people involved in this whole plot against Trump. And something else I wanted to point out to you. There were a couple things. First of all, we know that there were British people involved. We know some of this took place in London. And we also know that Gina Haspel, and I did mention this kind of in text in one of my videos, but Gina Haspel was working there in London. She was, I think, the head of the London office at the time. And yeah, she's now the current CIA director, in case you didn't know that. And so, yeah, she was there. She knows what went on. And so I tend to think there was a major reason why she was the person that they put in after Pompeo transitioned out of the CIA office to the Secretary of State. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that this Joseph Mifsud, we're going to be finding out more about him. He's going to be coming to the forefront pretty soon. I mean, there's a lot of info about him out there. And one of the things that Papadopoulos said on his Twitter feed, this was November 20th of 2018. He said, can't forget this, Joseph Mifsud was on Khashoggi's payroll. This was no ordinary journalist, just like Mifsud was no ordinary academic. That Mifsud-Khashoggi connection is much deeper than many realize. I witnessed it in London. I thought that was interesting. And then the last thing I wanted to point out, too, was that this Mifsud, just an oddity here. This guy is Maltese, okay? He's from Malta. And I believe he knew Pete Buttigieg's dad, who was also an academic. He was a professor at Notre Dame. So I just can't help but wonder if we're not going to eventually find out some connection between Mifsud and Buttigieg. So I don't know. It just seems really strange that Pete Buttigieg, who is the mayor of, South Bend, Indiana, which is not that big of a city. I mean, it's 100,000 people? Not very big. And Notre Dame, maybe people know Notre Dame. I mean, that is pretty big, but the city itself is not anything to write home about. And yet here he is. He's only been a mayor, and now he's zooming up, and he's like third in the polls under Bernie and Joe Biden. That seems strange to me. He's got a lot of people that are putting money in for him. So I think we need to pay very close attention to Pete Buttigieg. And if you don't know much about him yet, he's the one with the big, long, weird-looking name, but it's Buttigieg. I've done a few videos on him, and I put those in a playlist, so you can see all of them that are in there. So if you go to my channel, then you can look at the playlist, and you'll find that playlist on there. And don't forget that I have a playlist for the entire week. I did the entire week's videos, so if you've been busy doing other stuff, you can just click on the playlist, and you can see all the videos from the week. And you can click on play all, and it'll play all of them in that particular playlist in case you missed some. So I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.